afternoon to all. As promised, I said I would grab Piers, our head of trading, to ask a few questions in regards to the upcoming general election. Obviously, it's crept up on us. It's only next week now, next Thursday. And so I asked a few people earlier about questions they would like to ask Piers going into the event, and also trading the event, more importantly, about his expectations and so on and so forth. So going to spend the next kind of 20 or 30 minutes possibly just talking through a couple of questions, and then we'll hopefully get a bit of insight as to how Piers will be approaching the event. So first question then. Obviously it's been a very heavy political year thus far.
Yeah.
Kind of managed to avert, let's say, worst case scenario in France and the Netherlands. But where does this event, this UK election, how important is it in the context of all the political events that are ongoing in Europe and around the world at the moment?
So it's definitely a good question. I mean, I think with 2017, obviously there's an ongoing political risk in the form of Donald Trump, and at any moment that can escalate to become easily the absolute dominant force on everything. But outside of that, then I would actually put this probably in number 2 spot in terms of political events of the year. So obviously the French election's done, market friendly. We've got a German election end of September. Currently, polls and local elections suggest that Angela retains power. There's obviously, again over the weekend, developments on Italy, with perhaps now the chance for an Italian election in the autumn. All right, that'll be more interesting than the German one, I would say, as a market risk. But at the moment, we don't know if that's going to happen or not. So what we've got is this UK election that came out of the blue to a degree, although certain person sat to my right predicted it. But I would say, it does carry pretty significant implications for the Brexit negotiations and the end Brexit deal. So from that point of view, I do think it's pretty key.
Okay, so I guess the question this leads into then is that the pound has seen, if we bring the pound chart up on a slightly longer dated chart, we can see it's appreciated substantially since the point of when Theresa May first called the snap election. So that's that very powerful move. I think it was the 18th of April when she called that. It's one of the biggest up days we've had actually in a long period of time. So we've gone from around the 126 handle all the way up. We breached 130 only around a week ago or so. So what outcome is currently priced into the market at this point in your view?
Right, so you've got to obviously look at where the market was trading pre-announcement. So before Theresa pushed the button, so 18th of April. So before then we were very much trapped in a channel, that's a sideways channel, and it was very much like, it was 128 to 120, okay, on the futures. Oops, let me just turn off my pointer tool here. But 128 to 120 was absolutely the channel that we were in, okay. And just before she announced, we were kind of, I guess, top half of that channel, okay. And obviously we'd had ups and downs here off the back of soft Brexit, hard Brexit, obviously some dollar movement. But ultimately the call for the general election made a big change and shifted the exchange rate up to 130, which is the highest we've been if you go back here to the big kind of October flash crash. So it was the highest we've been since October. So what's priced in is we're trading, let's just say roughly 129, which is still at 7-month high. So we are pricing in a decent increase in the Conservative majority. Decent, obviously what number is decent is the question, but I would say anything. I don't think we're pricing in a 100 plus seat majority. I think we're pricing in 50 to 75, and if we get a big win for Theresa May, then I think decent sort of upside targets would be these September highs, let's say up at 134.50, let's say, for example. If you just look on a weekly chart, 134.50, as you can see, is an important resistance. It's the top of that consolidation after the Brexit vote. Don't think we're going back to 140, 150 like we were before the Brexit vote, because obviously the Brexit risk is still there. So you're not going to get a full retracement of that, but certainly up to 135 would be a target on the upside if you get the Conservatives winning a majority that's more than 100 seats.
Okay, so that being said then, what's your actual personal view on what you think the outcome will be in terms of seats and so forth?
Yeah, let's have a look at this chart here, looking firstly at the polls. This is the poll of polls. So this is updated today, this morning. And so, the big situation over the last week or so has obviously been the big convergence. And so this is where the Conservatives have lost ground and the Labour Party have seemingly boosted up to levels they haven't seen for more than 12 months. And so, for a period here, it's looking like Theresa May's campaign, her election campaign has just come off the rails, and it looks like Jeremy Corbyn's all of a sudden, some kind of
Phoenix from the flame.
Indeed. Tony Blair back from the ashes. I would say this is misleading. If you're thinking about seats, then obviously at the moment, in 2015, the Conservatives won a hugely surprising single-party majority of 17 seats. So the big story here is, why did Theresa May call the election? Well, you can see the gap between Labour and Conservatives at that point was absolutely monstrous, multi-decade gap. And so she called the election on the basis that she wanted to dramatically increase the majority that the Conservatives have in Parliament to, let's say, 100 plus. If you look at the day she called the election, the gap would feed through to and imply a more than 100 seat majority in Parliament. The thing why that's important, of course, with just 17 seats, Theresa May basically virtually needs all of the Conservative MPs on her side to vote through any bills. Now, a portion of those Conservative MPs are very kind of far right-wing, let's just say hard Brexit. Certainly no deal's better than a good deal in their eyes. They just want to leave and get the hell out of Europe, so they're not going to vote for any soft Brexit kind of policy. So Theresa May's idea, of course, is to dramatically increase the majority of Conservative MPs in Parliament. Therefore, she doesn't need to rely on the far right Conservative MPs' hard Brexit views, and she can push through a softer Brexit deal. And not need these far right-wing kind of Conservative MPs to vote. So I would say that this convergence we've had, I would say, is misleading in that, first of all, on the Conservative side, okay, fine, it hasn't been a great campaign so far. Obviously there's been U-turns on some of the manifesto points, but we've got now, whatever it is, 12 days, 10 days, and I think Theresa May will now push and make it entirely about Brexit, and this is her weapon. This is her key policy point where Labour are absolutely nowhere, and more than half the country want Brexit, and the Conservative Party is the only party to deliver it. So I think you'll see the Conservatives improve. I think the big misleading thing here is the Labour vote. I don't think it's anywhere near that high. I think these pollsters are picking up a portion of certainly the youth. When they're polling, you're going to get people that are actively part of this political dialogue and are very engaged. And so these Labourites who are very incentivized to get out there and be active because they're so far behind, I think this is misleading, and I think you'll see this diverge again. And anyway, I think the polls, as we've seen most of the time, and certainly on the Labour side, the polling tends to over-exaggerate Labour support. And so I think it's certainly a case of that again here. It's not like Corbyn has all of a sudden become some kind of amazing future leader. He's still Jeremy Corbyn. People didn't like him in
was the least
the
popular
middle
Labour
of
leader.
April, and nothing's really changed other than him delivering just an unbelievable manifesto that's really fired up the kind of hardcore Labourites, and that's the people that are being picked up by these polls, I think.
So does actually the narrowing play almost to, I suppose the participation rate for the Conservatives has always been high because of the demographic being older.
Yeah.
What I was going to lead to was actually, does this, the problem you had with the referendum was almost complacency on behalf of the Remainers.
Yeah.
And actually having had that event take place and having had the polls converge, does this actually cultivate also more people on the Tory side to vote?
So ironically, a convergence of the opinion polls here plays into the hands of the Conservatives.
Just on that point alone.
Because it mobilises those Conservative voters who thought it was in the bag and might not bother turning up.
Because we know what happened last time.
But it does come, last time, like for the Brexit vote, I mean, it's just stupid stuff like the weather plays a big role. There's really bad weather in London on the day of the vote. Loads of people didn't bother getting out there. And the result swung to Brexit. And so, is what we need, what the Conservatives need is this, to kind of just scare them a little bit, right? Actually, we do need to get out and vote, and then we need a nice sunny day for the whole of the for the whole day, and everyone gets out, and the turnout rate. The turnout rate is important for the Conservatives, but yeah.
Okay, so next question being one that's actually cropped up quite a bit, and I think it's a valid argument to talk about, and that is the prospect of Labour actually winning. Is there a prospect, or is this just something the newspapers are just publishing because capturing some of this online sentiment, but in reality can this actually happen?
No, that's the short answer. I think that as I said, these polls are misleading. I really don't think there's any chance of Labour winning. And there's several reasons behind why I think that, and Jeremy Corbyn being one, and their manifesto being too extreme, perhaps being the other. But I think ultimately, as Theresa May's message should start becoming more focused on, this is about Brexit. That's the key policy for this election, and the country voted to leave, and I'd say since then, you've probably, arguably, if you had another referendum now, you'd probably see a higher majority vote for Brexit. We're kind of on that path now, and it hasn't really started yet, obviously, the negotiations, but I think that this is still something people want, and so the only one who's going to deliver that is the Conservatives. And so with the lack of any leadership anywhere else, I don't think time will tell, but is Theresa May an amazing leader? Definitely the jury's out, but on paper and the evidence we've had, she's way more credible. I don't think there's ever been a period of time I've ever seen where the quality of leadership across the UK political parties has been so bad. And so it's almost like the least bad is the best.
So similar to the US election,
right?
Two most arguably unpopular candidates, both jousting for who's going to lead the nation in. It really said a lot, didn't it, at the time about how tight it was, where Clinton in reality should have been an absolute slam dunk that she should have won that election.
I'd say Theresa May's better than Clinton and certainly Trump as a potential candidate, but Corbyn's definitely in that basket of leaders that's they're a function of the kind of social unrest and the divided political dynamic that we've arrived at. And
so I think one thing then on the negotiation point that people, or a lot of questions I get asked, that maybe just to avoid confusion, is that a large Conservative majority doesn't necessarily mean hard Brexit.
No. Well, so I would say that. So let's put some numbers on it. So as I said, the Conservatives have a majority of 17 seats. Theresa May called this election, and at that point, the polls were suggesting she'd have 100 seats plus. Okay. Since then, obviously, we've had a convergence, and so you may be pricing like a 40 to 50 seat majority if these polls are to be believed, which would be a step up from the 17 they've got already. I think the big risk for Theresa May, the big risk here is not, are Labour going to win? Is there going to be a hung parliament? I mean, those are risks, but they're so fantastically small. I think the genuine risk is, does the Conservative majority only go up very slightly, or does it stay roughly where it is? Let's say it stays where it is. Let's say after the election they end up still with 17 seats. I think then you've got an interesting situation, really, that in some ways would be a vote of no confidence in Theresa May as a leader, and you may well then, I mean, it could lead to her being ousted, and then, you know, we've got a leadership race back on. And don't forget that 10 days after the election is the official start date for Brexit negotiations, and it could well be that the Conservative Party might be in some kind of leadership battle at that point. So I think any delay, I mean, don't forget this Brexit negotiation timeline is crazy short as it is, way too short as it is. So anything that delays the beginnings of that negotiation process, that's bad news. So that's why, two things about the Conservative majority not increasing. Theresa May at risk, we may well find we get ourselves a new Prime Minister, and who would that be? We've got some odds here. So you're looking at different kind of betting companies, and we're just looking at, obviously Theresa May's the favourite, so 1 to 9 on at Sky Bet, 1 to 7 at William Hill, and so on. But you're looking at 1 to 9, 1 to 7, 1 to 8 kind of area. Okay. Then Corbyn's the second favourite, so 11 to 2 or 9 to 2. Then, you know, obviously most likely it's Theresa May. But outside of Corbyn, let's say you get a leadership battle, or, you know, according to the betting companies, this is Boris's chance to come, you know, riding back into town, and somehow steal the show. And of course Boris is a hard Brexit campaigner, and so he'll be pushing for a hard Brexit, and so that would be certainly negative for risk assets. Any kind of leadership battle is negative, full stop, because it delays negotiations, and the new leader is most likely going to be more hard Brexit. Okay, so that's where I think the risk lies. Also, you could say that if there's no increase in majority, it really gives those hardline right-wing Conservative MPs the ammunition they're looking for, justification in their stance on hard Brexit. So that's where I see the risk. So let's say a majority anywhere between 17, or let's just say anywhere between 0 and 30, 40, then that would be really Theresa May's strategy failing. Her strategy of, let's call a snap general election to dramatically increase my majority. And I think that would be a negative event for risk assets. If we go back to the chart of sterling, you know, if that were to happen, that risk off, we've got the chart here, you know, looking back at when she called the election, if it were to happen that she didn't see an increase in the majority of any major amount, then, you know, you're definitely getting a reversal back to 125, and I would say that might even in the near term set up a move back to the 120 handle, which is what we were looking at before, which is the bottom of the overall Brexit event, which we hit start of January or mid-January. Okay, so, you know, any kind of failure here on May's strategy, and absolutely sterling weakness is back on. I know there's some people calling for the fact that if, well, let's say Labour win, some people are saying this will be sterling positive. because you could argue that, you know, a Labour win would be a soft Brexit event. But if Labour won, I mean, the kind of overhaul of the taxation system, I don't know, there would just be, we talk about uncertainty, that would dramatically increase domestically, but then also with regards to the Brexit situation. So certainly short term, anything other than a large Conservative majority should be market negative.
So the way then to play this out from a trading point of view is to kind of build some scenarios we've just discussed here. So am I right in thinking then that it's kind of a similar situation almost to what you had with the French election at the time, where the market had already kind of moved higher, the belief that Macron, the polls were indicating, would qualify with Le Pen, would be a market-friendly situation. And so are we in the same situation here, where a positive victory for Theresa May, let's say, goes to 80 to 100, so she kind of fulfills her mandate, but not massively with huge conviction.
Yeah.
Upside relief is going to be minimal comparative to the larger trade, which inherently comes with sub 50 or remain 17 or Labour win or hung parliament scenario. Almost you've kind of got maybe 5 different scenarios there. Only really one can be outright positive for pound, and that was the one you discussed. She gets 150 plus, and it completely defies everything, goes back to exactly the reason why she did it in the first place. We rally up to that longer term post-Brexit range, but that's kind of minimal almost, or it's scaled back considerably from where we were. Then the kind of I'd say baseline scenario being you get your 70, 80 type seats. She then goes on, negotiations go ahead, and so on and so forth. You get a mild relief rally. So
you get an uptick above 130, but it doesn't really justify anything much more above that.
And then it's the 3 factors which are arguably the bigger trades. So scenario -1 being repeat 17. 2, you get a hung parliament. And 3, Labour win. And then
I think they're negatives.
Then you've got kind of 125, 120, and then in the medium term, I guess. So okay. Other than the pound, is it worth looking at any other assets in the wake of the result?
You can certainly use. I mean, remember what happened if you're looking at UK equities. Then remember the Brexit vote itself. The pound dumped. And then the FTSE 100 also sold off sharply the day after. It was only then, after about a week, that actually the FTSE 100 started to benefit from the cheap pound and started to rise, and people got their head around this kind of economic risk. I would say the correlation between the pound and the FTSE is very strong. That's a negative correlation, and I would say that would most likely play out. So if you're going to get any kind of sterling weakness, or let me just think about this a bit more carefully. If you get sterling weakness but still a Conservative government, then that's probably good news for the FTSE 100. So sterling weakness with a Conservative government, good news. I think sterling weakness with a Labour government, arguably bad news for the FTSE 100. But as long as the Conservatives win, which is definitely most likely, it's just a question of by how much. And sterling weakness, good news for the FTSE. Sterling positive, any rallies to the upside, and sterling bad news for the FTSE. So you might want to look at that. I mean, I think from an inflationary point of view, if you're thinking about bonds, then any sterling weakness, another bout of sterling weakness is not good news for the inflation outlook. And so that could lead to downside for bond markets as yields rise. That puts if you get let's say disaster, you get another leg down below 120 on sterling versus the dollar, then it just opens up that further continued phase of inflationary pressures, and something the Bank of England are going to struggle to deal with. So I'd be looking from an inflation point of view. So any sterling upside, of course, that's good news from an inflation point of view. That should begin to see the inflationary pressures from a cheap currency reduce, and that in turn should lead to bond yields dropping again and prices moving up. So, but I think definitely sterling's going to be the out and out market to trade off the back of this.
Okay, and then in terms of timing, so
Yeah.
obviously we're gonna at Amplify we'll do full breakdowns and previews ahead of the event in more detail. But
Yep.
just in summary for the guys listening now, how's best to kind of position yourself timing wise for the event?
So yeah, if you think about the last general election, then what happened was, so this is a surprise result. The Conservatives won a majority. We didn't expect that. We thought it was going to be another coalition, perhaps. So it was a surprise result. But what happened was, at 10 p.m. On the day of the election, Sky News ran what's called an exit poll, and they revealed as a result of that. So their exit poll, this is where you just get, when you go and vote and you get these people outside the voting stations, and after you've voted you come out and they ask you, how did you vote? And you're at liberty to say, I don't want to tell you, but a lot of people will just say, yeah, I voted like this. And so they're able to capture data, and then these exit polls are then, as soon as polling stations close at 10 p.m, these exit polls are then valid, and Sky News ran it bang on 10 p.m, Conservative majority, and you had a big move in the pound at 10 p.m. The big trading event was 10 p.m, and then it was all done. By like 10:30, done. The reaction had taken place. The result was whilst not officially confirmed, markets were certainly ready to react to the exit poll aggressively. So on that basis, I would assume the same, whereby you're looking, the key time point will be the 10 p.m. exit poll. Sky News got it first last time. They got the scoop. Whether that is the case again, I don't know, but that'll certainly be the first channel that people will be looking for to deliver a conclusive exit poll, and then markets will react. If the exit poll is inconclusive, well, that's bad news. What you're going to need to see, if the Conservatives are going to win a majority here, a bigger majority, then the exit poll should easily be able to pick that up and measure that. Just looking here at, if I just transition the screenshot, if you do want to drill down into the ins and outs, I mean, what happens obviously through the night, then you get each region, each constituency counting up their votes and then delivering the official result, and this will go right the way throughout the night. And I don't know, some point in the early hours of the morning you're going to get an official, or the beginnings of an official result. You won't get all the constituencies actually delivering their numbers until maybe later in the year, later in the morning. So if it comes to that, then there are certain targets. So let's say on the right here we've got Labour targets, the constituencies, mostly the Conservative constituencies that Labour have targeted as potential constituencies that they can steal. So you'd be looking for these particular constituencies when they report that. So let's say Derby North, Conservatives have got a very slender majority there, 41. Gower here in Wales, you've got Croydon. These are the very narrow majorities, and if any of these swing to Labour, then that's certainly an indication that this idea the Conservatives are going to increase their majority, well, that's going to be invalidated. But I don't think it'll get to that. I think your exit poll is going to show a clear Conservative win. Then we just got to gauge, well, just by how much. So 10 p.m. will be the key point in time on the day of the election.
Good. Okay, so pretty much wraps up all the questions for now. So thank you, Piers.
Pleasure.
We shall be delivering probably a more thorough breakdown from a kind of trading review point or perspective closer to the time of the event. So at the moment, stay tuned to Trading Live, and then we'll catch you here tomorrow in the chat room. Thanks very much for listening. Take care.